Hi, everyone. Welcome. So glad to see folks here. My name's Zach Sadiq. I work at the Arc of King County as the Disability Systems Navigation Coordinator. I'm also autistic and a social worker. And, one of my core values is really amplifying the voices of people with lived experience of whatever subject matter is being discussed. So today, we're going to talk about the experiences of autistic elders. And I'm fortunate enough that we have three amazing panelists here, with us today to share their experiences. And, before that, I guess I'll just talk a little about why I thought this was an important subject. So, when you're asked to think of like what an autistic person is, who they are, a lot of people might think of an autistic child, some might think of an autistic adult. But when asked, few would think of a, autistic elder. It seems like most of the services that exist right now are geared towards autistic children and, not really geared towards the other side of things. And so I thought this panel would be really important to, talk about what autistic elders are going through right now. And, in looking through like the research, the conversations online, it's similar. There's a lot of research for autistic children, not very many for older autistic folks. And this is all the more important because for autistic folks with intellectual disabilities and epilepsy, the life expectancy is 36. For those of us who you know, don't have intellectual disabilities or epilepsy, our life expectancy is around 52, which is still, really, really shocking. And it speaks to a lack of, supportive healthcare and, just the impact of so many other things. And so, despite all of that, there are still some, autistic folks who have, been able to thrive at all parts of their lives. And I'm lucky that they're here today to share their stories and experiences. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the panel. So um, our first panelist is Kelly. Welcome, Kelly. Do you want to tell us a little about yourself, how you discovered you're autistic, how it's impacted your life, and, if that impact has changed as you've gotten older?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kelly. I am, I think I'm 53. Yeah, 53. And actually, I'm probably one of the newer people to discover that that I'm autistic. I found out last year. Yes, last year. So around January. Actually, 2 years ago. I'm sorry. It's been about 2 years. So I can't remember what any of the questions were. So, as far as impacting my life and what have I discovered, it has. It's actually given me a lot of answers to a lot of questions about myself. And as far as um, impact, it has a bit of a hiccup. I have lost my marriage out of it, which it is what it is. You can't have somebody be there if they're not willing to be, and that's fine because I'm willing to be there for myself. So, and that's all that really matters. And and as far as my everyday life, it hasn't really changed because who I was before was, I guess, my autistic self. So it hasn't changed. I just have to revamp my dailies. I'm very what's the word I'm looking for? Goal oriented as far as or task oriented is what I'm trying to find out. I'm very task oriented, so every day is pretty much the same for me. And I'm background note. I'm ex military retired, so I have a lot of downtime, uh, and that's probably might be the little hiccup too, because I'm always trying to find things to get myself uh, going. Um, so as I guess within the last 2 years, going through this, it it's been a learning, it's been a challenge, it's been a lot of things all at once, and I'm still um, growing with it. And And that's pretty much about it.
Awesome. Thank you. I think that last point is an especially important one. We still learn things and we still grow, no matter what part of our life we're in. And I feel like that's going to be a recurring theme through the panel. So thank you so much for sharing a little bit of your story there. So next, I believe, is Bev. How's it going, Bev?
Okay, thank you for having me, Zach. I was born in 1960. I spent many years wondering what was wrong with me. I didn't know that there was anyone else like me. I didn't have a diagnosis growing up, but I had many labels. I was called clumsy, weird, shy, difficult, slow, immature, rude, inconsiderate, and warped. And that was just from my family. So I took an interest in abnormal psych from around the age of 12, and I spent a lot of time in books looking for um, people who were supposedly damaged and dangerous and trying to find out which type of those I was. And I knew about autism, and autism was a thing, but it was considered exceedingly rare in those days. 1 in 10,000 people were considered to be autistic. I saw bits and pieces of myself there and in other places, but I never found anything that could explain why I couldn't make friends, keep friends, get other people to understand what I was saying, or make my body do the things that I understood how to do, why I hated being touched. I decided at around the age of 10 that there was no way I'd ever have a professional type job because I couldn't tolerate any fabric on my legs that wasn't denim. I didn't know anyone else who had these things going on. So about 20 years ago, as I was continuing to read in books and look for bits and pieces of myself, I ran into a memoir and then another one, and they were like lightning strikes through me. I was shaking. I just knew that, this word autism describes me in so many ways. So of course I started reading everything I could find about autism at the time. And the way it changed my life was every way. I had spent my young adult years working in retail and restaurants. I spent 15 years stocking shelves at Kmart and feeling really lucky to have that job. And there's nothing wrong with that job, but I'm not sorry that I had that experience either. But I really felt like that was what I could do, that there wasn't a lot of beyond that would be suitable work for me. But with the new information that I had about my sensory and cognitive needs, I was able to figure out what accommodations I might need to succeed and how to arrange those for myself. So I ended up going back to college at 42 and stayed on and got my master's in social work. And around that time, a little bit before going back to school, I'd started blogging and I'd started having invitations to speak at conferences. And I got a job eventually at my state's University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities, the Human Development Institute at UK, University of Kentucky. And in that workplace, my differences are respected and are even seen as a strength, and my ideas are respected. And more recently, I was made co-chair of my state's Autism Advisory Council. And as I gain more and more opportunities to influence policy, I find that I gain more enemies, and not just from parents and professionals, but, you know, now I am a suspect among many of my fellow self-advocates for going to these places and sitting next to the director of a center that does ABA, and just being in those spaces somehow makes me a person to be feared and suspected of being a traitor. So fortunately, I've reached an age now where it matters less to me if people like me or not. I had to let go of caring much about my credibility with any of the groups of autism stakeholders, and to put more focus on the few areas where I might be able to make a positive difference for autistic people. So that's where I am now. I have not found that it gets any easier. Some things get easier while others get harder. It just is what it is.
Sure. And yeah, that's such an important note to end on, and definitely one I think we'll want to explore further. And I can definitely empathize with a lot of your experiences, you know, within advocacy. It feels like, you know, we're always walking on tight ropes. And when you've been doing that all your life, it sounds like it definitely takes skills and a lot of like courage and strength to be able to do that. And, you know, that was clear from the way you spoke and carried yourself. So I'm looking forward to hearing more of what you have to say. So thank you. And so last but not least, how's it going over there, Lex? You look really comfortable in that chair. Let me unmute you first, or figure out. Let's see, where are you?
I got it.
Okay, cool.
There we go. All right. Yeah, I'm it's a comfy chair. And I'm feeling pretty good. Let's see. So about myself, I am someone I've been through a revolving set of diagnoses. When I was a boy, I was diagnosed with ADHD, as a young adult with Tourette syndrome, and more recently with autism. I think as specifically about the autism, I was encouraged by my youngest sister, who is a speech language pathologist with 2 autistic children. And she was like, you should look into this. This is probably what's going on. I had considered that possibility before, but I never quite fit the extreme male brain stereotype. And it took a few decades to learn that the problem may be with the extreme male brain stereotype rather than with me not fitting it. Maybe that needs to change. How has it impacted my life? Well, I mean, it's like my career, definitely. I have this extremely complex relationship with the technology industry. That is currently, I am not employed with it, but I have always been a member of the technology community. And it's really made it difficult for me to navigate the workplace has been I mean, I've always, and it's ironic because it's always been easier for me to do the actual work than it is to just like go through. Oh, just the job interview process is like torture. And if I try to explain that to someone, it's like, well, it's that way for everyone. It's like, no, you don't get it. It is really, really difficult for me to organize and plan and execute a job search. It plays to all my weaknesses. So that's on the other hand, it's been I mean, I was one of the early adopters of the internet back before there was a World Wide Web. So, and as we all know, there are a lot of autistics were also early adopters, and I did have had contact with various communities that are very seriously unneurotypical, and that I count that as a blessing. And has the impact changed as I've gotten older? I am well, as I've gotten older, I have discovered that I have fewer and fewer fucks to give, you know. So I just don't, I mean, I am more comfortable with myself and as I am, and I'm really not less interested in like polishing off the rough edges, except, you know, well, I mean, I've done that for a lot of my life, you know, working some of the time I've worked as in public service I worked for Seattle Center for 10 years. But you know, so I mean, there's places for people to be polite, but as far as me taking that personally, that I don't do that as much anymore.
And that sounds very similar to what Bev was describing
Yes.
In her, you know,
Mhm.
later part of her answers. It's just like you
Yes.
learn,
Mhm.
you sort of develop this armor, you know, like you
Mhm.
just with the way the world is, you realize that, you know, you got to march to the beat of your own drum. And,
Oh,
you know,
yes.
that's something,
Mhm.
yeah, definitely to explore, I think, later on in this
Mhm.
panel as well. So
Mhm.
thank you all so much for, you know, your great introductions. I'm really eager to hear more about this topic from y'all. And before I do that, I just wanted to, you know, invite the audience, like if at any point you've got any questions, you know, that came up based on like someone's answer, feel free to type it in chat. And, you know, if the question is like really connected to what we're talking about, I'll, you know, we might potentially pivot to that question. And we'll also try and leave some time in the end for questions from the audience as well. I just want to make sure like this is as, you know, relevant to where everyone's at and what y'all are working on. So cool. Well, the next question is, you know, going back to like other stereotypes that exist about autistic people, you know, we're supposed to be mind blind or like incapable of knowing what other people are thinking about. So with all of that being said, I'm guessing a lot of the audience members are wondering like, why is this panel called like Stimming All the Way to the Grave? Like, how did this get past my boss? Like, did she know about it? And why haven't y'all panelists like complained about, you know, the title or anything like that? Like, why even is it titled you know, Stimming to the Grave? Like, what does it mean to you, and what does it say about the autistic elder way of life? So Kelly, you want to field any of those you know, questions?
No. You know, I sat there, I think last week when I had the other questions you sent, and was really trying to ponder what that meant, and really I was at a loss, other than it seemed like that, you know, we are who we are, and and then when our time comes, we will still be that person, you know. So I don't know any other way to answer that. I tried to get a different foresight for it and could not wrap my brain around it. But I like the title of it.
Yeah, totally. No, and I think it's just like what Lex said, you know, like we are who we are, and you know, we're always going to be that way, sort of like this irreverent energy in a lot of cases. Yeah.
Hmm. Very much so.
Totally. Well, Bev, do you have anything you want to add to this? Since you're the person who came up with the title name. Let me unmute you there. Cool, you're unmuted.
Yeah, thanks. It was really just a quick off the cuff quip, but looking at your question, I think there are three parts to this. And the first part is the life expectancy, the fact that we do not expect to live as long as our allistic or neurotypical peers. And I think that that is something that people don't talk about much, understandably, because when I've brought it up in groups that include parents of, children, obviously that's alarming to hear. And as you mentioned earlier, the causes of death for people who have intellectual disabilities, seizure disorders, some other co-occurring conditions, the number is around 38 years. For those of us who have different co-occurring conditions, one of the chief causes is suicide. And that's a topic that's really close to my heart, that I've struggled with depression throughout my life. And it's, actually one of the reasons the primary reason that I ever wanted to do advocacy was to try to help make a better world so that autistic kids don't grow up being so excluded and blamed for their differences that they make a plan to no longer exist before they've even reached adolescence. The second part of it has to do with aging and how much more difficult it becomes to mask. I don't have the energy for that anymore. I'll stim if I want to, and I'll stim if I don't want to. And that's just the way it is now. The third part has to do with humor and relates very much to the theory of mind idea that keeps popping up. And you mentioned it with the mind blindness. And Baron Cohen has just done irreparable harms to autistic people in so many ways, with both the extreme male brain and the theory of mind, and the idea that it goes along with a belief that we lack humor. We lack the ability to understand jokes, and we're not good at idioms, right? We're not supposed to understand idioms, but supposedly neurotypical people do. So Stimming All the Way to the Grave is a riff on Laughing All the Way to the Bank, which originally was Crying All the Way to the Bank. And it was something that Liberace said in response to having won a defamation lawsuit, that he was crying all the way to the bank, using that in a sarcastic, ironic way to mean the opposite. And at some point, somebody, undoubtedly neurotypical person or people changed it up so that now the saying is much more obvious and much less clever. And nobody says crying all the way to the bank anymore. But there are autistic people, including myself, who love humor and love playing with language. When we change it up, we tend to add layers of meaning to expressions rather than to flatten them out. One thing I really appreciate and love about my fellow self-advocates is the way that we can take a joke and just twist it and turn it and perseverate on it and it can live on forever through, conversations, one autistic person to another, to another. It's one of the things that I enjoy about my autism. So those were the 3 lines of thought I had in connection with the title.
So, well, yeah, there's definitely a lot of like depth and meaning to the title. And thank you so much for explaining those experiences and the thoughts behind all of it. It is, I think, really important to understand just like how y'all gotta be when you're living in this world. And thinking about what you said earlier, centering your advocacy around like making things easier for the next generation of autistic children. Like it's the same reason why I'm in this work as well. And it seems like my generations had it easier than yours. And from working with the next generation of autistic folks, like they have it a little easier than we did. So things are getting better, but it has taken so much work, hasn't it?
I hope that's true, that it's getting better. I'll address some of that in the next question.
Well, looking forward to that, or maybe not looking forward to that. We'll see. Yeah. Lex, what are you thinking?
Well, I love the title. I think it's great, and I relate to it. I mean, because I was diagnosed with Tourette's before I was diagnosed with the autism. I mean, there was a point where I was like taking medications to try to stop the ticking or stimming, whatever you choose to call it. And my current therapist, it says, if it's not broken, don't fix it. It's like if I'm, I take meds for depression, but that's about it, because if it's, and so I'd rather, as far as the stimming and twitching part, I'm going to twitch away until I die. And that's, so yeah, it's a great name. And I do appreciate it. And what else do I have to say about the subject? I think, well, I may have more to say in the next question as well about mind blindness. We'll get to that, definitely.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And yeah, I'll also add in, like, I absolutely love the name of the panel as well. And Bev, I don't know if I told you, but I received emails from like 2 or 3 people telling me that they like spit water on their keyboard after seeing the title. So it had that big of an impact. Yeah, so I agree. Awesome. So the next question we've got is, kind of what we've been talking about already, and I'll try to move so that I'm not like fading out of the screen. It seems like a lot of the autism conversation is centered around early intervention, or, providing services for autistic children around the first few years of their life. So much so that I was originally going to call this panel late intervention. And yet when the children turn 5, they lose, many supports and services. And, when they turn 18 or 21, it seems like pretty much most, if not all of the services drop away, at least in Washington state, if, folks aren't eligible for developmental disability administration services, which seems like 80% of us are, and it seems to be similar in most of the other states as well. So what I'm wondering is, like, for the panelists, do you feel like there's also like a similar drop in supports for autistic elders? Like, do you feel like your needs are being met currently, that you're able to like make the choices you want to on a daily basis? And, what needs to exist for you that doesn't exist already? You want to take it first, Kelly?
Yeah. As far as needs are concerned, I very much agree that there is no support for, and I've been hearing it a lot, especially within our meetings, the lack of support out there in the autistic community for older folks, whether they're 18 or my age or older. As I said before, I was in the military and I started going to counseling. It was the beginning of it was for the fact of I was having communication issues. And so I just never understood why my style was different than why really nobody understood what I was saying. And so, and I was made to feel that it was my fault and I needed to figure it out. And, you know, all the books in the world weren't going to help me because that's just not my learning style. I'm hands-on. So, you know, let me go to counseling and find out, which is when I finally found the right counselor who told me that it's because I'm on the spectrum. And which then after that, you know, we had this ebb and flow of no, I'm not, and you can't make me. And that went on for weeks until I decided, and after research going, okay, yeah, I guess I am. But at that time, that particular counselor was at the VA and she was leaving and she was trying to find somebody to take over my care and there was nobody. Um, and apparently there was a lot of people on the spectrum that were trying to do counseling at the VA and there's nobody there and nobody is willing to do it. And I was even told by another counselor, we don't have time for that. Let's pick up something else. What other problems do you have? And I'm like, right now, that's my biggest issue. I need to understand this. So, right, I mean, she has a private practice now and I can go see her when I need to. And that's great. But for people in the military, there is nobody. And I think that has to be something because right now, somebody that I know that works at JBLM and is a counselor is, and now knowing and understanding uh, me and me sharing what I've learned about myself, they're seeing it in soldiers now. And these soldiers aren't having problems with their work, they're having problems at home. So, and she's not qualified. She that's not her main thing. But she's kind of trying to pick it up just to be there for these soldiers. So, whether it's in the military or in the outside uh, world here, there does need to be more emphasis and more out there for as far as counselors. I know, you know, I have it a little bit lucky because I am retired and I don't work, but I know that there are a lot of people I can see now going back, and I did on this question, why did I not have, or did I have problems when I was in the workforce? And oddly enough, all my jobs I wrote down were like, they didn't really deal with people. I mean, I was in the military, but I had tasks. It's all task oriented stuff, which that's why people on the spectrum thrive well in the military because they have a task. You do that. All right. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. And you go about your day. And that's a perfect world. And every job after that, it was the same thing for me until I obviously couldn't work anymore. And I can see how, and the new thing I guess learning is the being overwhelmed and do the shutdown of just overstimulated of all the outside stuff. And now that I'm understanding more about myself, I'm allowing myself to, I guess, feel that and accept that and know what that is, and then just completely shut down. So, um, yeah, I don't know how we can make it better. I mean, obviously, starting here with this panel and doing something like this is definitely going to help. But there needs to be more. I think something on a quicker pace, because I think if we had something like that, then we wouldn't have this age of what Beverly was talking about of life expectancy. I don't see why we can't have a full life as is, all the way to the grave. So
Totally. Well, that's so your answer was really super informative, and it really reflected a lot of what I've heard from other autistic veterans from, you know, multiple branches in the military. You know, either found out while in the military or after they were discharged, and the VA has not been able to support them whatsoever. And it seems like there's a lot that really needs to change there.
And what I found out also, and what's sad, is that if somehow they are assessed as on the spectrum, that there's no place in the military for them. And I'm like, that's the best place. I don't understand how that can be. This is a soldier you want because all they want to do is do their job. So yeah, that's going to be, and I know that I meant to ask about the DSM-5, that how that's changing as far as for the military, what that's going to entail. But I meant to get that answer before this meeting, but I'm sure we'll find out later how that's going to transpire. Yeah.
Yeah, and that is such an important point, because I have heard of a few folks who were, essentially kicked out when their, superiors found out that they were autistic, just because of the misperceptions out there of what autism is or what it,
Yeah,
looks
because I'm really
like.
thinking that it's more that they're scared because they had the perception of, the Rain Man perception, and how's that going to look in a uniform, but which is not the case, obviously. So
Totally. And I think it's like the biggest barrier to what is actually, what's causing there to be like zero services at the VA right now.
And I think what they don't understand is that there are so many people on the spectrum in the military.
Yep.
They just don't know it. They don't know. I mean, if they were to sit there and do I think a questionnaire of work life and home life, they would soon find the amount, the percentage of who is and who isn't.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see the data. Awesome. Well, appreciate all of that information. And it's just an indication that there's more that needs to be changed. So Bev, I'm sure you've got a lot of thoughts on this. I can try to unmute.
I keep trying to hit the mute at the same time you are.
No worries.
Undoing it. So I'm very wary of pairing the ideas of supports and interventions together, because these get conflated too often. And to me, they're very, very different things, and sometimes opposites. Services that gets used to mean either one, but usually closer to the intervention side of things. I am eternally grateful for not having received formal interventions as a child. The informal ones were more than enough to destroy my spirit. To me, intervention means imposing change on someone, and support means accepting the person as they are and providing whatever is needed to navigate spaces that were not designed with disability in mind. I hear more parents than self-advocates talk about the decline in services that happens throughout the earlier years. They talk about falling off a cliff at the end of school and not having anywhere to turn. And these are very legitimate concerns, with so many people stuck on Medicaid waiting lists for community supports, for just the simple ability to live in one's own home rather than being sent to a large or small institution. Why do we not have those kinds of supports in place for young adults? Even with transportation, why is there not support for transportation everywhere. Obviously, because we live in a society where people with disabilities are not valued very highly. And that's sad. To the extent that I've ever had any supports, they have been provided by what you might call chosen family, lifelong friends, partners. I get help reminding me to pay bills and renew my car registration or go to the doctor, or I would not do these things. Now, my chosen family members are getting older too. They forget things, they're tired. I don't have any children. And my solution to most things is that I'll worry about it when I have to and not a minute earlier. Don't have a very strong capacity to think about the future and plan for it. In fact, I behave as if I don't have that capacity at all sometimes. It's gotten better as I've gotten older, but it didn't really start getting better until after my 40s, and it hasn't gotten enough better to keep me out of trouble. I live in pretty much constant fear that somebody with some authority is going to decide that I can't care for myself. It would be easy to justify. And I feel like I nearly die from irony daily as parents of autistic kids swear that I'm nothing like their children. I'm really high functioning. And I end up isolating myself more than I would otherwise, because if people ever really saw me, I think some of them would want to take away my rights. So no, I don't have the supports that I need, but I never really expected to. And, I don't see it as a pie that everyone can only have a certain size slice of. I really wish that there could be supports for every disabled people who needs them. But at the same time, I know how it actually works. And I understand that the fears that some parents have when they see people they think of as super high functioning, like myself, and realizing that maybe their kid who needs someone 24 hours a day doesn't have everything they need. So there's this fear that maybe we are here in these advocacy spaces because we're trying to jump ahead in the line and get stuff for ourselves. I haven't found that to be true of one single self-advocate I've known, but I recognize that fear in the parents who are sharing these spaces with us. And it all makes me very sad.
Yeah, I definitely empathize with that sadness as well, especially in April. It seems like, the tensions and misunderstandings just really seem to get so much worse. And I always dread April for that exact reason. And I can also really relate to, the whole high functioning just means the impact of our disability is, I guess, somewhat easier to bear, no matter how much energy that actually costs us and no matter how much that burns us out. And so that really connects well with, you were sort of describing being in this sort of survival mode, not able to think about the future, just always having to focus on the crises that are happening in the here and now. And it's so connected. And I think the stress that comes from that is probably one of the reasons why the life expectancy is so low. It totally brings with it autoimmune conditions or substance abuse or so much else that has a negative impact on our health. And then when you consider like the inaccessibilities within the like healthcare system that would in theory support us, like it's just like, yeah, there's so much there. There's so much there that needs to change. So yeah, really appreciate just like the thoroughness of your answer. Thank you. Lex, what are you thinking over there? And I'll unmute you.
Oops,
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, we unmute each other at the same time. Let's see. Well, I've been thought one thing. It's like, how does it go through? I appreciate Bev's point about the difference between support and intervention, because I'm a lot of my support has come from my family, and it still is now. And I live with my mother, and of course, I'm also giving her support as well. I mean that, and there isn't really any and this the whole social economy, it's a much more efficient way of providing those supports, but it's not supported, I mean, the way that it should be, and for various reasons. So let's see. Yeah, one of the issues that I would say about early intervention, in some ways, I'm grateful that I wasn't diagnosed young, because my complex relationship with the tech industry, I've seen quite a few. There's quite a few people, most of them male, most of them white, who were diagnosed young and have been like their support they've gotten has been through along the lines of the Simon Baron Cohen extreme male brain theory. So, and they have thus been discouraged from trying to develop empathy for people, and more encouraged to do things dealing with things, and specifically engineering. And so you have a lot of guys in the tech industry are like that. And it may be very good, sometimes very, very good for their bank accounts, but it is not that good for society. I mean, because you have people who are designing our society's future, we want them to be trying to be empathetic. I mean, that's a major deficit there. And because I didn't grow up with this stereotype, I became a sociology geek. I discovered, no one told me that I wasn't supposed to be able to empathize with people. And I discovered psychology in high school, and then sociology in college. And it was like, oh, this is really fascinating. You can study human beings systematically. And it can be a really strong special interest, and you will never get finished, be done. It's just endless. And yeah, I like, and let's see what other things I would like to discuss. How supports I have been through, a lot of the supports that are out there are like vocational rehabilitation. There's a lot of things that are oriented towards people with physical disabilities, and we need to like adjust it more towards people who are with neurological issues. And so there's a lot of these hoops you have to jump through, which are going to be difficult for people who have executive function issues like myself. And okay, let me look at, is there a drop in supports? Yeah, I mean, and of course, I will say, I mean, I have my sister who helped diagnose me. She's dealing with, two of her sons. One of them is low support needs. He's now working at Big Five and is enjoying it. And the other one is high support needs. And it's like, yeah, you have the drop off at 21. And I don't see that it really, I don't see that's stops. And one more thing about the tech industry, as I continue to babble on, is that it's well known for being ageist. It is a very youth oriented industry. and so I've experienced discrimination on that level, and it is pretty common, and it's not another thing that isn't good for the, well, I mean, for instance, if they had, I mean, for someone like myself who was on Usenet back in 1990, if I had encountered someone had asked me for advice on, well, we want to start a forum where we allow all points of view and we want free speech for everyone, I could have pointed out, well, if you've actually experienced that, there's a lot of problems with that. I mean, I saw there were in forums that have absolutely no moderation, you end up with a bot that releases Armenian genocide denialism every 5 minutes. And yeah, we never, I kind of resent the fact that, yeah, if you've asked me my opinion, I would have let you know that you were going to be facing some serious problems if you were going to do this. Okay, and I think I've got.
Sure. Well, and that, I think your answer really actually ties in well to the next one, talking about, ageism and how, like, wisdom of like all different ages isn't exactly valued. How, like, with the tech, the tech field, like, yeah, I've heard similar things about, older workers being tossed aside, and then, like, mistakes of the past being repeated again in the future as well. And that is a really important point to share. Like, knowledge is important, especially when it's like diverse forms of knowledge. And it's, yeah, the same with like autism, and the same with so many other things as well. So I appreciate you bringing those points up. And so that leads us to the next and final planned question. So much of the societal perception around aging sees like being old as a very like negative thing. And so my question to the panelists is it similar to the perceptions and stigmas that exist around autism? And do you feel like there's positive things to being an autistic elder? And Kelly, you want to take this one first?
I need to ponder that a little bit.
Sure.
Somebody wants to go next.
Yeah, Bev, how about we go to you?
Sure. So one way to look at aging is a series of shifts in ability. And most of these are seen as negative: decreasing energy, increased number and intensity of physical ailments. And a few are generally recognized as positive, like becoming comfortable with who we are. The knowledge that we gain from years of living is valuable, but isn't always valued by others. I'd say that being older is a neutral situation, just like being autistic or allistic. And the societal responses are very similar. A lot of this has to do with our perceived usefulness. I'm not a perfectly made cog to fit into the capitalist machine. And now my cog is imperfect in more ways. Try to, stay on top of current thinking, especially in autistic advocacy, but invariably some old ideas are lurking, and that's why it's really, really important to me to have intergenerational friendships. I gain a lot from working with younger autistics, and I'm not always sure that they gain as much see people trying to invent the wheel over and over again because they don't know their history. They don't know the history of self-advocacy as it was envisioned by people with intellectual disabilities, or the history of autistic self-advocacy and how ideas have emerged and evolved in conversation between autistic people. Feel like I could be a really useful cog in that particular machine, but even that isn't always wanted.
If I could like pry and ask, do you have examples of like, you know, things that, you know, folks have tried to like reinvent, or, you know, actions that were taken that might not have been taken if they knew the past?
If you could come back to me, I think I can name a few.
Okay, totally. We'll do that. Kelly, have you had enough time, or do you need to ponder a little more?
You know, I don't think I could have put it any better than what Bev has said. I do believe, like she said, the intergenerational, as far as all of us coming together and hashing this problem out, would be great. But a lot of times, I guess being older, a lot of people don't want to hear what we have to say, and you know, and that's just what it is. We, but at the same time, doing things, you know, like our meetups, we have that, and we're able to sit there and say what we need to say, or say what we want to say. And maybe if, as long as one person maybe takes something out of there without some negative context, then, you know, maybe we've done our part. I don't know. So I'm just hoping that even doing this will definitely help, even if for a little bit.
Totally. I'm sure it will. I think it will. Lex or Bev, have you thought of what you want to say, or should I jump to Lex?
Some of the things I've thought about are a little more controversial than I wanted to get into today. And then I thought of another one, and then I forgot it. Autistic mind at work.
Right.
When I think of it again, I'll put a reminder to myself in the chat.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Lex, what are you thinking about this question?
I do see that there's a parallel between the how autism is seen as a deficit and how being an elder is seen as a deficit. And there's a lot of positive things about it. A lot of much of it is like being able to see the big picture, a long-term perspective on how things have developed over the years. And yeah, and again, as Bev has said, reinventing the wheel. I mean, I really like, for a lot of the young activists, I'm happy that we have young people who are that passionate. But I also remember when I thought I had all the answers, and when I'm at a couple weeks away from being 60, I realize how little I know. I mean, just how completely complex and incomprehensible the universe is, and how it's given me more humility about the and also I also realize that, I mean, a lot of what we're doing is not gonna, I don't expect to see results during my lifetime. I went to see Michael Moore speak once, and there's one point he made that really resonated with me, and he talked about the suffragettes, and that everyone who was at that, of all the women who went to that first convention, none of them ever got to cast a legal vote. But so you want to, it isn't, realizing it's not about you. It's that we're part of this long process, really, that goes beyond our own lives. If you feel that, then it can sound sometimes pessimistic to say that we're not going to fix all these problems in our lifetime, but it really helps to set your expectations so that if you actually change some little thing, that actually is, and if you look over the long haul, I mean, it's all been a bunch of little things over time.
Yeah, and that's definitely something I've grown to, understand and appreciate the longer I've been in advocacy, especially so, now that I've been seeing like some of the younger, activists like showing up, wanting to change the world in a day, like the same way I was like 5 or 10 years ago. And it's just like, yeah, I wonder if, the folks who had been in this, doing this work like 5, 10, 20, 30 years, longer than I have, seen the same things in me. So it really does, like, it brings to mind the quote, like, what is it, like, youth brings energy, like age brings perspective, or something like that. I feel like I've heard that before somewhere. So yeah, thank you so much, Lex. Bev, have you had a chance to think of anything, or should we jump to audience questions?
So I'm really not wanting to jump into a conflict or two that have been going on where a lot of people have taken sides, but I did think of something that is adjacent to this, and that has to do with the use of the actually autistic hashtag. There have been conversations online about, what it means and how it originated, and people are explaining it. People who were not there are explaining it to people who just take it at face value, that some autistic people came up with this as a way of saying that they're more autistic than others, and therefore it's a bad thing. The reality was not that at all. The reality was that Autism Speaks, they may not have started it, but they definitely were the major player there, was promoting the idea that people who are able to type on the internet are nothing like people who are actually autistic. So they were doing this hashtag on Twitter. You don't want to start a hashtag or any kind of internet war with autistic people. You just don't, because we will perseverate, and we do have many technologically inclined folks who will get in there and stir things up. So that hashtag was taken over very quickly by autistic people, and we were using it all over everything. It's like, this person's autistic and this person's autistic, and we're, everybody that's in this conversation is autistic, and it was meant as a slap to Autism Speaks, not punching down on other people that we thought of as less autistic than ourselves. So this kind of misinformation gets circulated and combined with other pieces of misinformation, and all of a sudden there's this whole false history emerging. And I know that there are a couple of people working really hard right now on compiling some archives so that we have an accurate history of what the movement has been.
Yeah, oh man, that is so good to know. Like, it feels like that like hashtag was only invented like 5 years ago, even though it's probably been like closer to 10 or 15. And yeah, I guess I'm honestly feeling shocked that people don't know the history behind it. So it's like, what else is getting missed, you know? Awesome. Well, really appreciate sharing that information. That is really useful to know, especially considering like, you know, Lex's earlier comment about like, you know, this work like lasts longer than our lifetimes, and it's so important to remember that history. So thank you. Awesome. Well, I wanted to thank you all for answering the questions we have done so far, and we've got about 20 minutes left. So I'm wondering, you know, if there's any questions from the audience, anything y'all are wanting to ask any of the panelists, you can either type it in chat or take yourself off mute if no one else is talking and ask the question. And I'll just wait and see, you know, what folks are thinking about.
So are we just jumping in or?
Yeah, you're welcome to jump in if no one else is.
Oh, hi, I'm Andy Joyce. Can you guys hear me okay? Is my
You're a bit quiet, Andy, but
Okay.
you are like legible.
like, is this better or
It's not.
it's not? Okay, hang on then. All right, I'll just type it then.
Okay. I mean, it seems like the like transcription is able to pick up what you're saying. So we are able to hear you. It's just a bit quiet.
Okay, I'll get right up against the microphone. It seems like I'm distorting when I do that.
Yeah.
Zoom is terrible. It's just really bad. It's so bad. I can't even, I mean, I could rant for like days about how terrible it is. It's just of a badness that is, you know, has no scale, no sense of scale, okay? So I'll have to yell my question, okay? Is that all right?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. I was wondering if anybody had experienced anything like, you know, this whole resentment of people who are, you know, nominally boomer age. It seems like most of the people here are like me. There are Generation Jones age. You know, in other words, tail end of the boom. So, you know, we didn't get to have all the fun that the Woodstock generation did, but we still get blamed for all of society's problems. And so, and I feel like as an autistic person, I didn't start living until I was 50. I didn't get any of those. You know, none of that stuff happened for me. And so I was wondering if anybody else had been on the receiving end of anything like that, and if so, what did you know, how have you responded? And I get that from autistic younger people too. You know, it's like, you know, it's like I had you know, it's like I had to unfriend one person. I've only ever unfriended 3 people in my whole life. One of them was somebody who said that they couldn't wait for all the boomers to die. It's like, thank you so much. Everybody born between 1946 and 1964, you all suck. You can just, you know, pop an aneurysm now. So anyway, anybody got anything to say about that?
Any of you can jump in, panelists.
Well, I am unable to answer that question because I am 1968, so I will be moving on.
Well, it's kind of interesting because I mean, I basically think that Jones boomers have a lot more in common with early Xers than we do with Woodstock generation people. So, you know, the way they pick out generations is kind of weird to me because, I mean, when I was born, 1963, a lot of 17-year-olds, which would have been like the oldest boomers, you know, were parents. Sometimes a lot of the time they were even married parents by the time they were 17. It was very common. So it's like, how can we be the same generation?
I think, you know, a lot of us have at some point critiqued the generation or generations before us and blamed them for everything that has been wrong. It is somewhat different in the way that these kids nowadays, they feel entitled to say really harsh and extreme things like you should all die. I think that that's a big piece of the generation gap for me, is that I don't want to talk to people like that, no matter how much I dislike their ideas. At the same time, I understand the feeling that they've really been screwed over. They really have, compared to the opportunities that we had to get jobs and houses. I can understand where the resentment comes from. And I don't really care if somebody says, okay, boomer to me.
No, I totally get that. It's just I just can't, I just can't find my way. It's like it seems like I have problems making my way through the advocacy community because of my age. It's like they think that I had it easy. I absolutely did not.
I would say, yeah, some things were easier and some things are not. I mean, there's a lot of
Exactly.
support that people get. I mean, it's a lot easier to get accommodations in class, for example. But on the other hand, I mean, I had friends who were paying their tuition by working summer jobs as a bus person, and the tuition was affordable because the state was paying for most of it. And that's simply not true anymore. And it's just now people are taking out loans that.
Oh, I totally get that. I mean, I definitely, the economic privilege thing about not having to go into real debt to go into college. I get that part.
Yeah.
Certainly. And also, work life seemed like it was a little bit less demanding when I was younger. That people didn't demand that you had your nose to the grindstone every single second.
Yes.
So it's like I was able to work a lot more when I was younger, and that's why I wound up with SSDI and not SSI, which is more money. And I understand that there's economic privilege there too. I want to check that. But it's I feel like there's like some. I feel like there's like some kind of gap there where they've kind of got their ears plugged back against us, and I don't know how to navigate that.
And I think, like, if I can jump in, like, this conversation also, I think, is really tied to, like, the amount of trauma autistic people encounter. We've always sort of like had knives thrown at us throughout our lives, and it makes sense that we would just be like throwing knives within like the advocacy communities as well. And I think it's one of the reasons why like the advocacy spaces can be so toxic.
I just saw your comment about the avocado toast.
Yeah.
I definitely need to be eating more of that.
Totally.
Oh, don't diss spam. Spam is awesome.
Awesome. Well,
Spam, eggs, and spam.
Oh my gosh.
I'm glad others were thinking of that. Yeah. Well, thank you for the question, Andy. It was a good one, I think. Any other questions in the audience? Wesley, I think you had your hand up earlier.
I did. Now I'm having thoughts about what we just talked about. But my question was, do you have experience with like lifelong friendships? And did you find that you gravitated towards other autistic people or other neurodiverse people or neurotypical people? Or not, I guess, is the other kind of question. Thanks.
I'll just go ahead. As far as lifelong, I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 people in my life that I've known for at least 30 years, and they're all neurotypical. To be honest, looking back, high school and whatnot, I can't even really recall anybody that I can possibly label could have been on the spectrum. I even though I knew everybody, like when I was in high school, I was it, I guess the best way to put it, like everybody was in the middle like bullseye, and I kind of gravitated around the outside. Um, so I didn't have obviously like the true best friends. I just knew people. And when I went to college, I just knew people, and I went to military, and I just knew people. But I never had any really true friends, and people that I know for the 30 plus years. I mean, I, I they they just found out obviously last year when I finally was able to be comfortable enough to tell them about being on the spectrum. They were really good about the whole situation and asked, and which was a first of which I didn't know how to answer it because, like I said, it was new. What do you need from me that I can make you feel more comfortable? And I'm like, I don't know how to answer that question. Now I do, and they've been really good about things when we do have time to hang out. So, but I think for the most part, other than my daughter, which I didn't, disclaimer, I didn't have her, but I raised her since she was itty bitty, and she's very much on the spectrum. Other than her, um, yeah, no, I didn't know of anybody else possibly that was on the spectrum. But now, other than her, my nephew, my grandson, and now me. So I, that's it.
Well, I'd say that, as far as lifelong friendships, I'm going to be going to a wedding of one of my old high school buddies in a couple of weeks. And yeah, basically the people I've stayed in touch with, I mean, I wouldn't say they're not autistic, but they were the sort of the weirdo outcasts who hung out in the library. So they're probably all rather neurodivergent or marginalized in one way or another. And those are the people I naturally gravitate towards. So yeah, so I have quite a few long-term friendships, and yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Bev, do you have
Okay.
anything to add?
Yep. I think an entire panel on friendship would be really interesting, as I'm trying to edit down what I have to say to fit in a couple of minutes.
Mhm.
So the main point I want to make is the differences in the friendships that I formed before I knew I was autistic. I'm talking about those lifetime friendships, and the ones that I've made with people coming with that knowledge from the beginning are very, very different in character. Some of my old friends were very resistant to the idea of my having found out what was different about me. And, they reacted as if I were being dramatic. And it was a phase that I would go through, like all those other phases. That also happened because I was autistic. But this one wasn't a phase. And some of those friendships have not been able to recover from that. Whereas people that I met through my work who knew from the beginning that I was autistic, these are the ones who are friends and allies. They are solid. They're people that will ask those kinds of questions. What do you need? They're people who get me. And that's what I need in a friend, is somebody willing to see me as a whole.
Yeah, I definitely feel like we could do an entire panel of this topic, and maybe it's something you might see in a couple of months. I still have to figure out what my next panels are going to be. So stay tuned, everyone. Awesome. All right, so we still got about 8 minutes, so probably enough time for 2 to 3 questions. So is there anything else on y'all's mind? Y'all being the audience.
I was playing around with my microphone settings. Is this any better?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay. Yeah, it's just Zoom keeps pulling the switcheroo on me. But yeah, I mean, the whole thing with friendships, it's interesting because yeah, I have found it easier to make holistic friends the last few years. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I'm in the arts and weirdness is kind of almost expected. but but then again, but once in a while, I have it thrown in my face that even though I pass in a lot of different situations, there are many situations where I do not pass. There's just going to be some things that I cannot do. Like, for example, a bunch of people were like going out and playing music and like when it was like 95 degrees outside, and I was just like, I don't know about that. And so yeah, what do it's like, do you have that problem with passing until you don't, and then having people react to you badly because you stopped?
That's exactly why I don't even try.
Yeah,
I've
same
had those
here.
experiences and they're painful.
I've pretty much stopped trying for that reason as well.
Yeah, you just take me as is. If not,
Mhm.
see ya.
Yeah, it's so exhausting, isn't it? Otherwise.
Mhm.
Okay, thanks.
Awesome.
I can
Well,
find. I just wanted to say, I can find I really loved hearing what everybody had to say here, and I can really relate to a lot of it. Yeah, it's like a lot of it's just like, yep, 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 yep. So I'm really happy that you did this, and I really appreciate hearing you.
Yeah, likewise. This has been such a great experience. So Peter asked in chat, what was the most surprising thing about aging as autistic? It's a good one. Or is it just a situation that's full of surprises and you can't think of anyone?
Yeah, for me, it's like every day. Well, not it used to be every day. Now it's kind of every week, every month is a new surprise I'm learning about myself, just for the fact that it is still very new for me. So, and I do a lot of. I think most of the time I end up having a lot of reflection of when I was younger to how I got to here. So it's a lot of back and forth of that. Half the time I don't even know how I made it all the way here. But yeah, it's and a little bit of me wishes I would have known a lot, obviously a lot younger, because I'm kind of having fun with it now. Now that I'm comfortable in my own skin and being okay with, yeah, I am autistic. So what? So be it. What? And then there's always the looming question of, well, what does that actually mean for me going forward? So I don't know. There's a lot of ebb and flow to that question. So I guess stay tuned.
Thank you, Kelly. Lex or Bev, do y'all have anything to add?
What's surprising?
I don't think much of anything surprises me. I've always been pretty good at predicting how things will go, and this has me branded as a cynic and a pessimist because I see patterns, and obviously I'm either going to get older or I'm going to die. Obviously, I'm still going to be autistic, so it doesn't surprise me that sometimes I feel more autistic this year than I did last year.
It's probably all of the COVID vaccines, right? With the 5G autism nanobots.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe I'm just used to being surprised that it doesn't surprise me anymore.
Yeah, it makes sense with all the neurotypical shenanigans out there,
Yeah.
and all the surprises that brings. Like, it makes sense, at your point, like you'd be used to them by now and the surprises. Awesome. Awesome. Right. So 2 minutes left. Are there any final questions before we close out? I'll just awkwardly stare at the camera until there is. All right. Well, it's not. Can is there any way we can follow you all or learn more from you? It's a great question. Bev, you're probably the one who has like the most public exposure out of all of us.
Yeah, I don't really know what to say. I don't promote my blog anymore because I don't keep it up anymore. But it's called Square 8. If you want to know more about the parrot, that's the place to look.
Oh, you're the Square 8 one. I used to read that blog all the time. I love it.
Thanks. I did finally manage to remove the Asperger from the URL. It had bugged me for years. But my work project is called Innovative Supports for Autistic Workers, and that's with the University of Kentucky. You can find some stuff there too. If anybody wants to connect with me on Facebook, if you do that sort of thing, I'll recognize your name from this experience and affirm that. And I'll put my email here in case anybody wants to chat with me.
Awesome. And I just linked your Facebook, Miss Squawkers Macaw.
Oh, yeah. Squawkers Macaw. Yeah.
I'm sensing a parrot theme going on here. I'm not
Yeah,
sure
a little
why.
bit. Just a little bit.
Awesome. And then thank you for linking your Twitter, Lex.
All right.
All right. Well, it is, unless Kelly, you had anything else to add?
No, I don't. I don't tweet nor Facebook or any of that. I'm just on just do the meetups.
Sounds
So
good.
you find me there.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you all so much for just sharing all of your wisdom and experience. It was such, really great panel. And I can tell, the audience took a lot from it. And just wanted to thank the audience for, being here and sharing space with us. We will try and upload this panel to YouTube within a couple of days, and I will email that out to y'all when that happens. So until the next panel or the next time I see y'all, I hope everything goes well. So have a great rest of the day and a great week all. Bye.
Thanks for
Thank
doing
you.
this, Zach. I appreciate it.
Totally.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye all.